They pulled into the resort parking lot on a Friday afternoon, four of them, laughing, bags in hand, sunglasses on. Someone took a photo by the welcome sign, the kind of shot people post with a caption like, "Needed this." They looked relaxed. They looked happy. They looked like people who had absolutely nothing to worry about. By Sunday morning, one of them was dead. Not at the bottom of a ravine, not in some freak accident at the pool. Dead in a locked room on the third floor of a four-star resort in the middle of the afternoon checkout window. Dead with a story that didn't add up. Dead with three people downstairs eating breakfast who all claimed they had no idea what happened. One of them was lying. That much the investigators knew from day one. The question wasn't whether someone in that group was responsible. The question was, which one? Because the evidence, at least in those first hours, pointed in more than one direction. And the person who did this had spent the entire weekend building their cover story, carefully, methodically, one alibi at a time. This is one of those cases that got under my skin from the first time I read about it. Not because of what happened, but because of how normal everything looked right up until the moment it wasn't. Four coworkers, a team retreat, a company that thought they were investing in morale. Instead, they were funding the backdrop of a murder. My name is Danny Cruz. I cover true crime, the cases that stick, the details that don't let go, the moments where ordinary life turns into something you can't take back. If you're new here, hit subscribe, and when you're done watching, I want you to leave me a comment. Tell me what you think happened. Tell me when you think the plan was made. I read every single one. Now let's go back to that Friday afternoon. The group. You have to understand who these four people were before you can understand what happened. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't strangers sharing a hotel floor. These were coworkers, people who had been in the same office, breathing the same recycled air, sitting through the same weekly meetings, for years. The victim's name was Trevor Aldridge, 34 years old, senior account manager at a mid-sized logistics company based in Ohio. By all accounts, Trevor was good at his job. He had a reputation for being precise, detail-oriented, occasionally blunt, the kind of guy who sent follow-up emails when other people forgot to, the kind of guy who kept score even when nobody asked him to. His supervisor called him indispensable. Two of his coworkers used different words. The first coworker was Sandra Morrow, 29. She'd been with the company for 3 years, recently promoted to a role that Trevor had also applied for. That promotion had happened 6 weeks before the resort trip. Trevor had taken it professionally, or so it appeared. He told HR he was proud of Sandra. He told one of his friends something different. He said he was the one who deserved it, and that Sandra had gotten it because she was better at office politics than actual work. That comment got around. It always does. The second was Marcus Obi, 37. He was the group's team lead, technically outranking the others, responsible for organizing the retreat in the first place. Marcus had been with the company for nearly a decade. He was liked. He was trusted. He was also, according to multiple coworkers who were later interviewed, under significant pressure from upper management because the team's quarterly numbers had been sliding for 2 consecutive periods. This trip was his idea. His pitch to the company that what the team needed wasn't restructuring, it was cohesion. The retreat was, in a very real sense, his job on the line. The third was Carla Denton, 41, the oldest of the group by a few years, a project coordinator who had, at various points, worked closely with all three of the others. She was described as pragmatic, private, and hard to read. She didn't socialize much outside of work. She didn't have many close friends in the office, but she had information. She knew things about people, about deals, about conversations that happened behind closed doors. Multiple colleagues later described her as someone who collected knowledge the way other people collected grudges. 4 people, 1 team. A weekend at a lakeside resort in western Pennsylvania, 2 hours from the office, 3-day package, meals included. The company had paid for it. The company had expected them back Monday morning, refreshed and realigned. Trevor Aldridge never made it back. The dynamic inside that group was complicated in the way that most workplace dynamics are complicated. Layers of history, resentment, loyalty, and betrayal, all operating just below the professional surface. Trevor and Marcus had worked together for 6 years. They were not close friends, but they had history. They'd been through a difficult company restructuring together. They'd gone to bat for each other in meetings. But in the year leading up to the retreat, something had shifted. People in the office noticed it. Marcus had become colder toward Trevor, less collegial, shorter in his responses. Someone described it as the way you act around someone you've already decided you're done with. Sandra and Trevor's relationship was more openly tense. After the promotion, Trevor had stopped attending optional team lunches when Sandra was going. He'd started CCing her manager on emails she felt didn't require it. Sandra told a friend she felt like he was monitoring her, waiting for her to make a mistake. She told the same friend she was thinking about going to HR. And then there was Carla. Carla, who had said almost nothing publicly about any of it. Carla, who had observed everything and said very little. Carla, who had later told investigators she suspected something was wrong long before Sunday morning. That statement alone took investigators more than a week to fully unpack. The weekend. They arrived at the Cedarwood Lake Resort on a Friday at approximately 2:45 p.m. Check-in was smooth. They had 2 adjacent rooms on the 3rd floor. Trevor and Marcus in one, Sandra and Carla in the other. The resort was beautiful. Waterfront views, a stone fireplace in the main lodge, a small spa, a restaurant with a menu that had won a regional award the year before. Friday night was documented in detail. The 4 of them had dinner together at the resort restaurant at 7 p.m. They ordered wine. They ordered appetizers. There was a photo taken at the table. Someone from the restaurant staff offered to take it, and all 4 of them are smiling. Investigators would later examine that photo for hours, looking for anything in the body language, the spacing, the expressions that might tell them something. What they found was 4 people who looked, for all the world, like they were having a good time. After dinner, the group moved to the bar in the main lodge. They stayed there until approximately 11 p.m. Bartender confirmed this. She remembered them because they were a table of 4, and they'd stayed late enough that she had to ask them to finish up when the bar started closing down. She said they'd been lively. She said there had been some spirited conversation, but nothing that alarmed her. At 11 p.m., they walked back to their rooms. That was the last time all 4 of them were in the same place at the same time. Saturday was where things got more complicated. In the morning, the group had breakfast together, but Trevor arrived late, and when he did, Carla later described him as quieter than usual. He ate quickly. He said he had some work calls to make. He left before the others finished. Marcus told investigators he'd assumed Trevor was just being Trevor, antisocial, wrapped up in work, probably still simmering over the promotion. Sandra said she'd barely noticed. Carla said she noticed everything. That afternoon, the group split up. Marcus used the fitness center and the spa. Sandra went kayaking with a group of resort guests she'd met at breakfast, an alibi that would later check out completely and remove her from the primary suspect list earlier than the others. Carla went on a walking trail. Trevor, according to the resort's keycard access logs, returned to his room at 1:17 p.m. and did not leave again until 6:44 p.m. Saturday evening, the group reconvened for dinner. It was tenser than Friday night. Witnesses at adjacent tables described it as subdued. The wine was ordered but barely touched. Trevor and Marcus reportedly had a brief, sharp exchange near the end of the meal that the others attempted to deflect. The subject of that exchange was never fully confirmed. Both Marcus and Carla gave slightly different accounts, and neither account was consistent with the other. They were back in their rooms by 10 p.m. That was the last time anyone credibly confirmed seeing Trevor Aldridge alive. What happened between 10 p.m. Saturday and 6 a.m. Sunday is where the case turns. Trevor's room key registered one exit at 11:32 p.m., then nothing. No re-entry. No activity on his phone after 11:47 p.m. No calls made. No texts sent. No apps opened. His phone was found on the nightstand the next morning, fully charged, undisturbed. That detail about the phone is one of the things that investigators kept coming back to, because Trevor, by every account, was a communicative person. He texted people back quickly. He sent emails late at night. He was the kind of person whose phone was always in use. Yet, from 11:47 p.m. Saturday, nothing. Silence. His body was found Sunday morning at 7:23 a.m. The discovery. It was Marcus who reported it. Or rather, it was Marcus who triggered the chain of events that led to the discovery. At 7:15 a.m. Sunday, Marcus called the front desk and told them he was concerned about his roommate. He said Trevor hadn't responded to a knock on the door. He said the door had a "Do Not Disturb" sign on it, but that felt wrong given the time. He said he had a gut feeling. The front desk sent a staff member to do a wellness check. The staff member, a young man named in reports only as Hotel Employee RT, knocked twice, announced himself, and used a master key to enter the room. He found Trevor Aldridge on the floor between the bed and the window, face down, unresponsive. RT immediately called security, who called 911. By the time paramedics arrived, it was clear that Trevor had been dead for several hours. The room told a story, but the story had gaps. The bed had been slept in, partially. One side looked disturbed, the other untouched, which matched the single occupancy arrangement. There was a glass of water on the nightstand. Trevor's shoes were placed neatly by the door, the kind of thing you do when you're settling in for the night. His wallet was on the desk, untouched, cash still inside. His laptop was open, screen dark, battery dead. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle in the traditional sense, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. But there were signs, subtle ones, that the investigators began cataloging within the first 30 minutes. A slight bruising pattern around Trevor's neck, a small laceration on the back of his head, consistent with impact against a hard surface. And something else, the positioning of the body itself, which the lead investigator described in her notes as arranged. Not the way someone falls, the way someone places. The investigation. The county sheriff's department took over the scene by 9 a.m. The other three guests, Marcus, Sandra, and Carla, were brought downstairs separately and asked to wait. They were not told they were suspects. They were told they were persons of interest in an ongoing welfare investigation. That distinction would blur quickly. The autopsy results came back within 72 hours. Cause of death: asphyxiation combined with blunt force trauma to the posterior skull. The blunt force trauma occurred first, enough to render the victim disoriented or briefly unconscious. The asphyxiation was the cause of death. The medical examiner estimated time of death between midnight and 3 a.m. Sunday morning. That window immediately narrowed the focus. Trevor had left his room at 11:32 p.m. He had not returned, according to the keycard logs, which meant whatever happened to him happened outside that room, or someone with access had entered after him. The hotel's internal camera system covered the lobby, the restaurant, and the exterior doors. It did not cover the third-floor hallway. This was a 4-star resort that had prioritized guest privacy over surveillance coverage. It was a decision that complicated everything. What investigators did have was phone data, and phone data told a story that none of the three survivors had volunteered. Marcus Obi's phone pinged a cell tower at 12:14 a.m. The tower it pinged was not the resort's closest tower. It was one located 0.7 miles from the resort property in the direction of a lake access trail. When investigators asked Marcus about this, he said he must have gone for a walk. He couldn't sleep. He did this sometimes, walked when he was stressed. He said he was alone. That might have been the end of it if Carla hadn't changed her story. In her first statement, Carla said she'd gone to bed at 10:15 p.m. and hadn't woken up until 6:30 a.m. She was certain of this. She was a deep sleeper, she said. She took melatonin. She hadn't heard anything. In her second statement, given 48 hours later after investigators showed her something from the resort's exterior camera footage, Carla said something different. She said she had, in fact, gotten up around midnight, that she had looked out her window and seen something, that she had chosen not to mention it initially because she wasn't sure what she'd seen and didn't want to accuse anyone of anything without being certain. What she said she saw was Marcus Obi crossing the resort's back lawn toward the lake trail at 12:07 a.m., alone. Or at least, she said he looked alone. The phone records did more damage. Trevor's phone, which had gone silent at 11:47 p.m., received one incoming call at that time. One call, answered, lasting 4 minutes and 31 seconds. The call came from a prepaid number that had been purchased with cash from a convenience store 40 miles away, 3 days before the trip. That phone had made exactly 2 calls in its entire operational lifespan. The one to Trevor at 11:47 p.m., and one made from the resort's approximate geographic area at 12:52 a.m., to a number that investigators traced to a former coworker of Marcus Obi's, who had left the company 2 years earlier under disputed circumstances. The former coworker, when contacted, said he hadn't spoken to Marcus in over a year. He said he hadn't received any call from Marcus or anyone at the company recently. He said the call in question had lasted less than 10 seconds, the kind of duration that suggests a pocket dial, a misdial, or someone who thought better of making contact. None of it was clean. That's the thing about real investigations. The evidence is rarely a straight line. It's 3 contradictory statements, 1 cell tower ping, a prepaid phone, and a woman who waited 48 hours to say what she saw from her window. But it was enough. The truth. Marcus Obi was arrested 9 days after the body was discovered. He was taken into custody at his home, not at the office, in the early morning hours before most of the neighborhood was awake. His attorney said he was cooperating. His attorney said there had been a misunderstanding. His attorney said a lot of things over the next 14 months. The case the prosecution built was not complicated, even if the investigation had been. Here is what the evidence ultimately showed. Marcus Obi had a problem. A serious one that had nothing to do with quarterly numbers and team cohesion. He had been diverting funds from a company client account for nearly 2 years. Small amounts, irregular intervals, the kind of financial manipulation designed to stay below auditing thresholds. Trevor Aldridge had found out, not through snooping, but through the same meticulous, detail-oriented habit that had made him indispensable to the company. He had noticed a discrepancy in a report. He had dug into it. He had found it. What Trevor did with that information was, according to the prosecution, the reason he was dead. He had confronted Marcus privately, not immediately going to management or HR. Whether this was an act of loyalty, a miscalculation, or an attempt to negotiate something, the prosecution didn't speculate. What they established was that Trevor had told Marcus he knew, and that Marcus had decided the only resolution was a permanent one. The retreat was Marcus's idea. That was established in the very first hours. He had organized the trip. He had booked the rooms. He had chosen a resort with limited surveillance coverage and rooms that shared a floor but not a door. He had arranged the rooming assignments so that Trevor was his roommate, meaning Marcus had natural, unquestioned access to Trevor's space, his schedule, his whereabouts. The prepaid phone was the linchpin. Investigators eventually recovered it from a storm drain located along the lake access trail that Marcus had walked that night. On it were text messages, deleted but recovered through forensic extraction, that included a specific request for Trevor to meet Marcus on the trail at midnight. The messages were framed as urgent, as something Marcus needed to tell him about the company situation, something that couldn't wait. Trevor had responded. He had agreed to meet. He had walked out to that trail trusting that Marcus wanted to talk. He never came back. The trial lasted 11 days. Marcus's defense argued that the phone evidence was circumstantial, that the cell tower data was inconclusive, that Carla's delayed testimony was self-serving and unreliable. The jury disagreed. They deliberated for 1 day and 4 hours. They came back with a verdict of guilty on the charge of first-degree murder. Marcus Obi was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At sentencing, the judge noted that Trevor Aldridge had done nothing wrong except trust a colleague, that the resort trip, the team-building exercise, the photo by the welcome sign, the Friday night dinner with wine, had all been for Marcus a stage, a carefully constructed setting for something he had decided to do before the bags were ever packed. Carla Denton testified at trial. She was measured, precise, and devastating in the way that only people who have been watching carefully for a long time can be devastating. She said she had not fully processed what she saw from her window that night. She said when the sun came up and the police arrived, she had started to understand it. She said she had waited to be certain because she had not wanted to destroy a person's life on a guess. She had been correct. She had been certain, and she had said so. Sandra Morrow left the company shortly after the trial. She gave a brief statement to a local paper in which she said she still couldn't fully reconcile the person she had worked next to for 3 years with what he had done. She said she thought about Trevor every time she walked into a new workplace. She said she probably always would. CTA. Here's what I keep coming back to with this case. The planning. Not the act itself, but how far back the planning started. A prepaid phone purchased days before the trip. Rooming assignments arranged to maximize access. A trail walk framed as an innocent conversation. This wasn't a moment of rage. This wasn't a confrontation that escalated beyond what anyone intended. This was calculated. This was a man who decided, at some point before he ever packed his bag, that his colleague was going to die on that trip. That kind of premeditation changes the way you see everything else. It changes the Friday night dinner. It changes the photo by the welcome sign. It changes every smile, every laugh, every completely normal moment in that 48-hour window before Trevor Aldridge's body was found on the floor of a locked hotel room. I want to know what you think. Leave me a comment. Tell me when you think Marcus made the decision. Before the trip, during, or somewhere in between. Tell me what detail from this case you can't get out of your head. Tell me if you think Trevor suspected anything before he walked out to that trail. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. I cover cases like this one, the ones that don't let go, the ones that live in the details, the ones where ordinary life turns on a single decision made by a person who looked completely normal right up until they didn't. There's another case coming. You don't want to miss it. Stay sharp.